Okay, right, thank you very much, and thanks again to everybody for coming out on such a wild night. This is a double header with myself and Andy. I'm going to do the serious astronomy, and Andy will do the pretty pictures because he doesn't know any serious astronomy. Not true at all. First thing an astronomer needs when he or she goes observing is this particular appendage here. And I meant to bring this the last time I talked about eclipses. This one actually came from Indonesia, and where it's very, very warm and humid, you need that. But even better, get it to open the whole way. It's a hat. And keeps the sun off, but lets the ventilation in as well. Now, you'll see some photos from America, and I'm not wearing that, and that's another story. But anyway, as for the eclipse, you've all come along here because I suppose you know something about eclipses, or you want to know. But if you haven't actually seen one, I'm wasting my time talking, basically, although I'm going to try and tell you why I'm telling you, and you have to go and see one, basically. It's the most amazing sight or experience you will ever have in your life, in my opinion, certainly in the natural world. So, come on. Right, this actually goes back to Australia, one of the eclipses that both Andy and I saw. That was an early morning one, and that just gives you an idea of sort of the progression of the eclipse through the various partial stages to totality, and then sort of the partial stages in the reverse order. But no photograph, as I'm going to stress many times, conveys what it's actually like. You have to be there. And Andy will be showing lots of photographs that he has taken himself, but just to give you an idea of the sort of things you're going to expect, this is just what we call the diamond ring effect, which is just as totality starts, and you're seeing the very, very last bit of ordinary sunlight up there, but you're also starting to see the sun's corona of the atmosphere, and it gives you the effect of a ring and a brilliant sparkling diamond on it. And then there are all sorts of other effects there, a progression through Bailey's beads and prominences and so on. Again, I'm not going to steal Andy's thunder, because I'm sure he has some excellent photographs of that he actually took himself. I'm not a serious photographer. I go along, I enjoy the thing, I take some photos that I like just as a souvenir, but there are people like Andy and Paul who take much, much better photos than I do, so I'm not going to concentrate on that. But I'm sure most of you know, but basically eclipses don't occur every new moon because of the tilt of the moon's orbit to the ecliptic. Most of the time it passes above or below the line to the Earth, and it's only whenever it's what we call the nodes, where the two orbits intersect, and if that occurs at new moon, you get a total eclipse of the sun, and if it occurs at full moon, you get a total eclipse of the moon. But we're only going to talk about solar eclipses here, and we'll go on. We can have partial eclipses, of course, as the recent eclipses that we saw as total. A lot of them were actually visible as partial here, because we in Ireland would have been somewhere up about there. And you can also get what's called an annular eclipse, whenever the moon is unusually far away from the Earth, and so the shadow is smaller, and it doesn't reach the whole way to the surface of the Earth. And then you get a photograph or an image showing the moon surrounded by some sunlight. Some of the recent eclipses, and Andy and I have seen quite a few of these. Excuse me turning my back. We saw the one in Indonesia there, which we saw on a cruise ship. Andy, I think, saw that one in Africa. I went to the Faroes for that one there and was clouded out. Andy had more sense. He went up in a plane above the clouds and saw it. We both saw this one here in Turkey. I've probably missed a few others, but the one that we're going to look at in a moment is this one here that goes right across the USA. And I'll also be talking about some of the forthcoming ones, like in South America, and another one here in North America. And the next one we're going to talk about actually is on that slide. But you can see that they occur all over the world, and we'll not be having one in Ireland for quite a while, which is why we have to go to some amazing places to see them. A little bit of astronomy. You all know that Camelopardalis is not just a constellation, it's actually a giraffe. And I went out for the annular eclipse in Tanzania last year. I probably wouldn't have gone all that way, except that I was paid to lead a trip out there. And you see some amazing things. Leo, of course, and this one doesn't have a constellation named after him, although it should. Quite an imposing creature, especially when he made a mock charge at us. It was only a mock charge, but you don't know that until it actually stops. And it was sort of almost changed the underpants time. That was a big bull elephant. Anyway, there's the annular eclipse there, just a projected image. It's a long, long story, which I'm not going to go into as to why I wasn't able to bring all my equipment to the actual observing site there. Weight restrictions on the aircraft. So all we were able to do was project the image, and I just got a shot with a wee handheld camera on that. So to come to the one that's sort of the main feature of interest, this was touted as the great American eclipse because, as you can see, the track of totality didn't touch land anywhere except the United States. And they were very, very proud of that, and maybe making America great again and all that, even before Trump thought of it. And concentrating on the actual track across what they call the contiguous states, in other words, excluding Alaska and Hawaii, and right across from Oregon to South Carolina. You could, in theory, observe it anywhere there, but both Andy and I made the decision we're going to go where the weather prospects are best, and Andy went up here in Idaho, and I and another group were in Wyoming because that area had pretty good weather prospects. The actual maximum duration of the eclipse was somewhere in there, but the weather prospects weren't quite so good. Turned out that they were clear, in fact, but statistically the chances weren't as good. And Andy will no doubt tell you exactly about his site. We went, as I said, to Wyoming. That little reservoir there called Guernsey, after the island on the Channel Islands, Guernsey State Park. It wasn't exactly on the centre line, but it was near enough, and it was a beautiful, beautiful observing site. And most importantly, we were able to get bookings for quite a large group of people who all came together. We all sort of travelled together and met up there. You go to amazing parts of the world. We've been to, well, Bulgaria isn't all that amazing, but Bulgaria, China, Turkey, Australia, Faroes, Africa, and so on. And of course, when you're there, you make the best of it. Like, for example, the wildlife viewing in Africa. And quite close to where we were, and there was another reason why we chose this location, amazing scenery like the Grand Tetons there. And we'll look a little bit more. Yellowstone National Park, we spent 3 days there, and we only saw about a quarter of it. It is absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. Most people know of Old Faithful, the geyser. That is just one feature out of hundreds. It's sort of fairly spectacular, but we would have liked another week there. It's basically where the earth is sort of spewing its guts out onto the surface with boiling water, boiling mud, eruptions and all the rest of it. And you really, really should go there at some stage. For example, the Grand Prismatic Lake, if only we'd been allowed drones, but I think drones were forbidden there, to get up high enough to get a photograph of it. It's about the size of 8 football pitches, boiling water. As it cools and moves towards the edge of the lake, then you get a whole lot of colonies of different bacteria, which give it all the different colors. And this is actually quite relevant to astronomy because it shows that bacteria can live in the most extreme conditions. The chances of finding them elsewhere in the universe are not nearly as restricted as we might have thought 20 or 50 years ago. The weather, I mentioned the hat. This was an American hire car, and that is a genuine reading of the temperature gauge in the car, 120 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 47 Fahrenheit. Not nice, especially when you're as susceptible to the heat as I am, but the humidity was near zero, so it was just about bearable. But I have never experienced heat like it. It was literally like opening an oven door. But we survived. Another little bit of an astronomical animal, Ursa Major, the great bear. This wasn't a grizzly, but it was a pretty big black bear. And we were not supposed to be as close as that. Just after I took that photograph, a ranger came along and said, "Get the hell out of here. You're far too close to it." But it's all part of the fun when you're on the Eclipse exhibition. Now, I'm coming to the photos that I took, and it's just to show you basically. And I've just realized I have left my camera behind. I meant to bring in the camera that I actually took it with. It's what's called a bridge camera, which is sort of an excuse for an SLR, sort of in between an ordinary little pocket digital and an SLR. It's not an SLR, but it has a good zoom range. And I was traveling light for various reasons, and you literally just put it in a tripod, and I had it set with auto exposure, autofocus, no drive, so you just had to keep pointing it at the sun and just press the shutter and hope for the best. And nowhere near as good as Andy's, as you'll see whenever he shows his, but it just shows you what you can get with a reasonably okay camera. It's a Canon, and it was about £110, I think, so not hugely expensive. So just a series. And this is what we call the diamond ring, and this is the diamond ring that occurs at the end of totality, whenever the moon is starting to pass away from blocking the sun, and the little bit of the edge of the sun first starts to appear. And again, I was just clicking and clicking and clicking, as you'll see in a wee video, and not terribly good in terms of quality, because the autofocus sometimes struggles with an object like that, but they come out reasonably well. And no photograph shows you what you see with the naked eye and what you experience, but that's roughly the sort of simulated view, simulation of the view you would get with the naked eye. You can see the prominences and so on, and you're seeing the corona around it. Now, the important thing, as I stressed before, you have to be in totality. Even a 97% or 99% partial eclipse is not enough. You're not going to see or experience the amazing phenomena. And people come up with all sorts of analogies as to comparing seeing a large partial eclipse and seeing totality. And these are some of them. Almost seeing totality is like almost winning the lottery, or someone watching somebody else kiss your favorite dream person instead of doing it yourself, or watching the International Space Station pass over compared with actually being in it. In other words, it's just not good enough. You have to see totality. So looking ahead, the next one in North America is actually in only, what's that, 7 years? No. Where are we, 17? Yeah. And that one is actually going to go across from Mexico right up diagonally across America and out through Canada. And if you know anybody who lives in America, or if you've always wanted to go and visit somewhere in America, it's not too soon to start planning. But there are a few before that, but that's probably the most accessible one in the near future. Just to give you an idea of how rare they are in any one place, the next total eclipse that's visible in Northern Ireland isn't until the year 2151. So that's why we travel. But it's a great excuse to go to some of these amazing places in the world. And these are the ones that are coming up. There won't be any next year. There'll be a few partials and an annular. But the next total solar eclipse visible anywhere on Earth is in July 2019. And it goes across the Pacific, enters Chile, and ends in Argentina. And that oval there shows where the eclipse is actually ending. That is where to the left of that line, the whole eclipse is visible. On this line here, the total eclipse will be ending at sunset. So basically, you want to be somewhere around about there. Trouble about Chile in that region is it's very mountainous and fjords and so on, and the weather prospects aren't all that good, but probably find somewhere where to be suitable. And then South America is extremely lucky. They have another one the following year, and that one actually traverses the whole way across South America. The whole, well, not the whole, but a good bit of the Pacific, a good bit of the Atlantic, and just by coincidence, it also doesn't touch land anywhere, even though it's such a long track, except in Chile and Argentina. But this time, the maximum of the eclipse is in Argentina. Of course, seasons are reversed there, so that's the middle of their summer. The previous one was in the middle of their winter. So if you don't mind a reasonably long journey and you fancied seeing some of the stuff in South America, like the observatories in the Andes and the high plateau in Chile and so on, that might be a good one to go to. If you look at any map giving the next total eclipses of the sun, you probably won't find this one, because this is a rather odd one called a hybrid eclipse, and that is where the track starts off as annular, as it's at the edge of the globe of the Earth. Another way of proving the flat Earth is wrong, by the way. It becomes total in the middle of the track, and then it ends way off somewhere in the Pacific as an annular again. And the maximum of the eclipse is up there in Indonesia, but not very good weather prospects. But you'll see it just touches the north west corner of Western Australia. And I haven't got to zoom in on that, but it actually does give you, I think, about well over a minute of totality, although it is a long way to go for just about a minute. But nevertheless, that will be visible. Weather prospects are almost ideal. You're pretty well guaranteed to see it there in terms of the statistics of the weather. The next one in Europe won't be until 2026, and that is a rather unusual one. It starts up pretty near the North Pole, and it comes down across Greenland. It touches the western extremity of Iceland, Iceland. The maximum of the eclipse is actually not on land, but it's very close to it. But up there you get about 4 minutes of totality, and then the track stretches down, just misses Ireland, unfortunately, although we'll get a large partial eclipse, but it's still total whenever it enters northern Spain there. So if you don't fancy a long transatlantic flight or something, you could make your way down to Spain, and again, statistically, the weather prospects up there are quite good, and that will be happening with the sun about, I think, 10 to 12 degrees above the horizon at the time of totality. So quite reasonable. Now, as I've said before, no photograph, no video, nothing I've ever seen in terms of recording an actual eclipse conveys what it's like. But to see a video and hear the reactions, thank you, Paul, you're going to rescue me here, of people who are seeing the eclipse for the first time gives you some idea of what it's like. So could we switch over to the wee video? And with this, what I did was just took an ordinary spare camera, a very cheap digital camera, put it on a tripod, pointed it in the direction of our group 2 minutes before totality, and I let it run. So there's me walking away from the camera, having set it up. On here we have a white sheet to try and record shadow bands, but I was too busy doing other things to actually look. This is only 2 minutes before totality, but the automatic exposure on the camera is compensating for the drop in light. But when it actually becomes total, you will see that it gets too dark for the camera. So there's me setting up here. Angela, my partner, she has her camera set up somewhere, but she's looking. You'll see people are, if they are looking, they're still using the Eclipse glasses because it's too bright. Even when there's only a small part of the sun's disk visible, until it's actually totality, you cannot look at it unless you're using the Eclipse glasses. You'll see that there's still shadows there, although the shadows become very sharp, and you won't see it at that oblique angle. But you're starting to get the reaction of people, and you'll see the light level is now dropping below the level that the camera can cope with it. So just listen. Now, it doesn't get totally dark, partly because there's light from the corona, and partly because there's light refracted from the zone of partiality outside the total zone. So you can see the horizon is still relatively bright, but it is dark where you're in totality. And people are pointing out there the stars, the bright stars and planets that are visible in the sky. You could see Jupiter and Regulus and Venus. and it was about 2 minutes, 18, 19 seconds duration there, and it goes very, very quickly. That noise is just wind on the microphone on the camera. So I'm busy taking photographs here somewhere, although I can't even see myself. You won't have to watch all of it, because after totality ended, I actually forgot about it. So there's a couple of minutes at the end that we'll just skip after totality ends. You can see it brightening a little bit. The sunlight is coming from the direction that I'm pointing the camera roughly, so it starts to brighten in that area. The serious astronomers are busy imaging and zooming in on prominences and things like that. I don't know who that guy is that went and stood in front of the camera. Now it's starting to reappear, and the diamond ring and the sunlight coming back again. And at that stage then, if you're observing, you start to need to use your Eclipse glasses again. So I think that's about it. I don't want to take up Andy's time. So that's it. All I can say is, if you haven't already seen one, put it top of your bucket list. You have to see a total solar eclipse. Thank you very much. So I think leave questions to the end. Okay.